Welcome to another episode of Birthing Beyond 35. I'm your host, Hayley Burns, and this is the podcast for women out there who are ready and thinking about having babies, perhaps a little bit later in life. You know, your advanced maternal age, you might be 40, you might have just been doing stuff in your life and you're ready to go down this path. Joining me today is Rachel, and she's better known by her initials as RVT. RVT is a rabbi. She's based in Brooklyn, New York, and she provides emotional and spiritual support to people on their fertility journeys. After herself not really being sure if she ever wanted children, RVT got to a point in her late 30s where she was ready to do something about it. And after some time trying to conceive naturally with her husband, she decided to go down the journey of IVF, resulting in having her first baby at 41. Rachel shares her IVF journey, which she endured, might I add, during the worst surges of the pandemic in New York City, while she was serving as a frontline hospital worker, a time that was extremely taxing on her emotional state. I've also linked RVT's info in the description, so I do hope you enjoy today's conversation. Joining me now is Rachel, but she is known as RVT. RVT, welcome to Birthing Beyond 35. Very excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Hayley. I'm really excited to be here.
So why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself and where you are right now?
Sure. Well, I'm currently calling in from Brooklyn, New York. I am a New Yorker by way of Toronto, actually. You may hear the accent at some point in time. I am a rabbi, and I work at a major hospital in New York City, primarily as a board-certified chaplain and a chaplain educator. So I train folks who are studying to become professional chaplains.
Amazing. So how has that been for you, I guess, as a reasonably new mother?
It's, it's actually been really great. My son, Asher, is a fantastic teacher, and I feel like I've been able to just kind of grow into my own identity as a parent and bring that part of myself into my teaching as well, which didn't exist before him. So,
that's awesome. Well, we're obviously going to get into all of that and how Ash's story came about, but let's go back to the beginning. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you met your partner?
Okay. So I am a rabbi, and I happened to meet my husband on Rosh Hashanah, our New Year. I was leading services for a community, and my husband was also working at this community at the same time. We hadn't met. And during services, we blow something called a shofar, which is basically a giant ram's horn. And I was told that this man named Toby was going to come in and blow the shofar. It's sort of like a highlight in the service. And I said, okay, I expected it was supposed to be my friend doing it. I was disappointed that I wasn't my friend. And then
who's this Toby guy? I don't want to see him.
Right. And in walks Toby carrying a very large ram's horn. And I am, it's a very holy day for us. So I am wearing like the ugliest white polyester robe. It's so, it looks basically like a marshmallow. And in comes Toby, and he blows the shofar, and it is beautiful. And that was kind of it. Part of the story, as Toby likes to joke, is that a couple of pages in my prayer book got stuck together, and so I actually I said the wrong thing. I led the community, and I was like, "Oh, you should all stand up now and go into this set of prayers." And then it turned out that was actually not the right thing to do. And Toby likes to joke it was because I was so flustered by.
Gotcha. You just couldn't resist this man that had walked in the room.
Yeah, it's true. I often joke, to folks, it really was like the last thing on my mind. Like
that's the best way, though. That's allegedly the best way you meet people when you don't want them and they just come knocking. So growing up, had you always wanted children? Were you maternal or not so much?
think so. I really, really didn't feel that part of myself. And I don't really know why. I just could, I wasn't somebody who played with dolls a lot and thought about being a mom. That just wasn't something I really thought about. And then as I got older and I had friends who were starting to really want to have children, it was a hard moment for me because I thought, well, maybe I'm just not meant to be a mom. Like maybe I don't have this like urgency inside myself. And so maybe it's not for me, or maybe I'm not wired to be a parent or something. And it took me kind of a long time to discern that it really was something that I wanted to do. But I definitely was not, maybe as I thought, imagine as when I was a little kid, like imagining my life in the future that I would, have a partner and have a family, but it really wasn't on my mind.
So how old were you then when you met Toby?
I guess it would have been in my early 30s.
Okay. So had you kind of crossed over to that path then, I guess, were you kind of like, oh, okay, he could be a prospective father, or were you still very much in that space of just, I'm doing my thing, not really thinking about that right now?
Yeah, I was really just in the space of I'm doing my thing. When Toby and I met, it was right before I was going to be ordained as a rabbi, and I was preparing to kind of move anywhere in the country where I might get hired. And so when he appeared, it was more of like oh, okay, wow, this could be my person. But I had not really started thinking about kids, or I was, just about to become a rabbi and really had been putting so much of my energy into my professional life. And it still wasn't really kind of on my radar until I was at least 35.
Okay, so let's get to that. So you're 35 now. You've been with Toby, I guess, for 4 years. How did that whole conversation, I guess, how did the process of you looking into your fertility and figuring things out begin?
Well, it didn't start at 35 between the two of us. It was something I started kind of thinking about on my own and, talking in therapy about, or just sort of like paying attention to what was coming up inside of me when I would be with friends who had kids, or seeing other people, posting that they were having a baby, and started to notice like, hey, there is a part of me that is feeling something. And it was about when I turned 37, maybe, that Toby and we were having conversations about becoming parents, but I think we weren't 100% sure. And so we ended up deciding to, it was sort of, we thought about, okay, maybe we will freeze embryos, try to create embryos and freeze them with the intention that, if this is something we want to do
later down the road, you've got the option.
Then we would have the option. And so that was kind of where we started. And then when we did finally decide we wanted to become parents, it turned out to be a lot harder than we thought it would be. And so I'm grateful that we had some embryos to turn to.
Okay, well, I'd love to get into all of that. So here you are 37 and you've started the route, or you've gone down the path of retrieving and freezing embryos. Is that correct? And was that successful, or tell me all about that?
Yeah, it's funny. The timeline to me is a little bit fuzzy. So we started that process, and again, I work in a hospital, and I started going through the majority of, my treatments and retrievals in the worst surges of the pandemic. Not ideal. It was, it was just one of the most isolating experiences of my whole life, right? I'm getting up early, I'm going to the clinic, I'm doing my blood draws and, injecting hormones and things. And then I'm going to the hospital where I'm there to provide care to other people who are all terrified. I mean, all of us were terrified about this deadly virus. It was just
a dark time. You're all in masks. You can't really connect with people the way you want to.
Yeah. And it was just, there was, just so much on my body and my spirit, and and my role in the hospital is providing emotional and spiritual support to people. And I found that what I really needed, I didn't have. I mean, so I have a fantastic therapist. She's great. And she was helping me through, this sort of difficult time. But I found like I really wanted to talk to somebody who understood a little bit more intimately what I was going through. And I'm a spiritual person, and I really needed someone to talk with me through some of, just holding space for my feelings and thoughts and trying to build ritual into the process. And so I just started creating that on my own. I'm really lucky to be surrounded by a lot of, other clergy people and other people who have access to, spiritual paths. And so I just started creating that. And as it turned out, we were lucky, and I have a son, Asher, who was born through IVF, through those treatments. And then because of it, I actually created a private practice helping individuals and couples with emotional and spiritual support, basically to provide people with everything that Toby and I really needed and wanted and didn't have.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I think, a lot of people, like your hospital coworkers or just, people in general would be like, oh, she's doing IVF, but they don't really, not many people know that much about IVF or really know, that you're in the hormone imbalance and the changes to your body and just how draining that is. And I think a lot of people don't really understand it, or they just haven't had it presented to them or the knowledge. So that is hard to, you're sitting there giving yourself to everyone else, but at the same time, like, oh my gosh, I would love a break, or I would love to be told everything's going to be okay, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it was wild. And again, people, understandably, they were focused on other things. And I tried to keep my focus on, caring for very, very sick people in the hospital. And at the same time, you have, all of those hormones in your body and already heightened anxiety and stress. It was wild. That's the best word.
I just want you to just talk about, I guess, how old were you when, or how many cycles you went through? Can you talk more a little bit about your process?
Yeah, sure. So I think I would have been 38. I did a retrieval cycle it's probably the May 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And we successfully had 3 embryos out of that retrieval cycle. And then, if I could go back in time, I probably would have wanted to try to do another cycle, maybe 6 months later. I didn't. And then the pandemic happened. And then I did a second retrieval during the pandemic. And actually, I remember the second retrieval was wild because I got it was like the second dose ever of the vaccine.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yep.
Days, I don't even remember, my brain is a little hazy, days before or days after my retrieval. And I was under so much stress, and the cycle went terribly. We did, I think we do have 1 embryo from that cycle, but it was horrendous. I was so stressed.
Yeah.
Those are the only cycles that we did.
Okay.
So I guess I would have been 40 when I got pregnant. We did an embryo transfer that was not successful, which was just incredibly painful. And then kind of had this choice point where we thought, okay, do we do another retrieval because we don't have that many embryos? Or do we move ahead and do another transfer and just go with it? And I felt like that, like I can't wait. I just want to. It's
a tricky decision because I guess in your head you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to try do a retrieval, wasting this precious time because we're told, eggs declining, you've got the embryo there. So I guess you're just let's just go for what we've got, right?
Yeah, I think ultimately I felt like, okay, let's, you work so hard to get these embryos. And if you're lucky, you come out of a retrieval with embryos. Not everyone does. And I just felt like, okay, I didn't want to stop. I think the theory was for us, we would do another transfer. And if that didn't work, then we would stop and consider seeing, doing another retrieval cycle or not. And it turned out that this transfer was successful and resulted in my son, Asher. And I was 41 when I gave birth.
Sorry, I didn't ask this question, but why did you decide to go for IVF and not try and conceive naturally? Or had you? Or I've completely skipped that. Yeah.
No, that's okay, Haley. So we were pretty sure that we wanted to become parents, but we weren't 100% sure. And, I had been, I don't remember, maybe it was at my OBGYN at the time had sort of thought, you're 37 or 38. If you're not ready right now to start your family and you have some capacity financially to do this, it might be worth looking into. So it was they were basically like in the bank.
Yeah.
Again, we're lucky to have something to bank. But then we did try to conceive on our own and it wasn't working.
How long did you try for, may I ask?
Oh gosh. At least 6 months.
Okay, well, some would say that's still quite early.
It was quite early. I think there was a lot of things. I mean, part of it was because I had gone through this retrieval cycle. What we learned is that I have PCOS, which I had no clue that I had.
That's great because I've actually had a lot of people asking me for like, can you talk to someone that's got PCOS? So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. I had no idea, right? I'm so struck by all the things that.
How did you find that out?
Because we were trying to time it for the retrieval. Like you call into the clinic on day 1 of your period, and I just wasn't getting a period. And I had been on.
Was this the first time ever? Or, okay, so you just come off birth control.
I'd been on birth control for a really, really, really long time, and I had something like funky happening with my hormones a few years prior that I didn't quite understand. I went to an endocrinologist. Like my hair texture changed. There was like something funky going on. They found nothing and said like, no, we don't think this is anything. And I never asked further questions, and I really wish I had. And so anyway, I think it was partly that, I don't have basically PCOS, if I understand correctly, is something that you kind of have to rule out other things in order to get there. It's not like we point at X and you diagnose that person as having it. And I didn't have a lot of the obvious markers for it. And so it was sort of like by deduction, I guess, that the fertility doctor sort of realized like, hey, you're not getting regular periods, and let's, look around at what might be happening. And it turns out that I just don't ovulate. I was going to say, I have no idea how long that has been going on because I've been on birth control.
Yeah, your whole life, pretty much.
Forever. Right? Forever. Because, I ended up on birth control because I had heavy periods, but I stayed on it because it was like, well, this seems like it's working and I feel fine on it.
You don't think about the after effects.
I didn't think to ask. There's so many things I wish I had thought to ask just in life. Yeah. Especially about my own body. And so,
hindsight, huh?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So here you are, you're 40, you've got you've had an awesome transfer. You've gotten that good news. How was your first trimester?
It was actually okay. I remember being a little bit nauseated, but actually was just so elated that
just so grateful.
So grateful. And so, we had just been through a lot. So it just, I was just really excited and happy. I will say that it was during this trimester that, which is unusual, that we discovered that I had gestational diabetes. Typically, that's not something they test for until you're
early. Yeah.
8, but it runs in my family.
Okay. Had you always had had you always wondered, had you ever been tested for it before?
Okay.
Type 2 diabetes runs in my family. It had never occurred to me. But again, this is a different OBGYN who said, you have some risk factors in your family history. We should just test for this. And I'm really, really grateful to her that we did, because we discovered, at 12 weeks to discover gestational
just
diabetes.
to have that knowledge.
Yeah, it changed a lot of things, right? I remember I had seen her that day, and we were talking about gaining weight, and she was like, you should eat 2 donuts a day if you need to. And then we did the diabetes testing, and she called me the next day. She's like, yeah, just please forget everything I just said. Like, really, that's not a thing that you can do. It really physically changed kind of the shape of the pregnancy. And
and especially those first trimester cravings.
Yeah, it was not as much fun as they make it out in the movies and other things. No. Getting to sit around and eat a lot of ice cream. It was.
Yeah, I don't think I ever did that. I think I was too fatigued. My thing was orange juice. I just wanted orange juice every day. I was drinking like half a gallon of orange juice every day. That's all I wanted. Right until the end. That's all I wanted. And then, once baby came out, didn't care for it anymore.
Yeah, that's so wild.
So you're feeling, so you've got this, you've been diagnosed with gestational diabetes. How are you feeling, I guess, mentally, being 40, you've been blessed, like, gosh, done IVF, I've had a successful transfer. Were you feeling great, confident? Were you having any head noise, or how were you mentally?
I think it was both just feeling so much gratitude that I had been able to reach that point, along with a ton of anxiety. I'm a pretty anxious person by nature. And
where's that anxiety? What's that pointing towards? Just fear of losing or having a mishap, or
fear that something would happen to this baby. It wasn't even so much about me. It was, riding on a subway and worrying, okay, is somebody going to run into me, topple over. Your mind, anxiety is terrible. And so it was pretty heightened, and it was sort of, a good thing, I guess, in the sense that because I had diabetes, I was then being monitored really, really closely.
Yeah, that's good. How often were you being monitored? I guess you're, because you're obviously advanced maternal age now, you've got diabetes. Are you going in? When did you start? I guess going in every week. How far along were you? How many weeks, if you can recall?
I don't remember. It's probably in the early part of my 3rd trimester.
Okay.
But it was pretty consistent up until then. Once they discovered the diabetes, and again, being somebody over 35, they were sort of like, there was already those kinds of check-ins, and then it got accelerated. And so in some ways it was helpful, because I got to see
everything was okay.
Have someone reassure me much more frequently than somebody without the same set of eyes on you. But at the same time, you're also anxious, and and you can't eat any of the fun stuff. So it was hard. And yet I felt so good in my body. I felt like strong, and I felt like sexy, and I felt just
in your element.
In my element. I didn't know that it was ever going to feel like that, and it felt like, I'm a parent. I am a parent to this baby that is not yet born, but here I am, and again, trying to normalize for folks around me. This wasn't, my husband and I just like decided that we would try to get pregnant, but really trying to be vocal about using IVF and the challenges that can create. It's a really different experience, right? One thing I think about is people would ask, like, oh, do you know, are you having a boy or a girl? Or I would say, well, yeah, because when you have embryos, they told us right away what sex they were, and so it wasn't a surprise. And so it's something that I think just trying to normalize for people and sort of give a different story and perspective about what it means to be building a family.
Yeah. Like I said, I think a lot of people just still don't know much about it unless they've really known someone that's gone through it. I mean, I don't know much about it, and I've got friends that have done it. But yeah, definitely not so much normalizing it, but just making it, just people having knowledge about it, I guess, and just understanding. And yeah, obviously some people have horrendous, long, yearly experiences trying to go through IVF to have a baby, some really harrowing experiences. So you were very fortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was that third trimester?
That was when I think things started feeling a little bit difficult, partly because I was trying to manage the diabetes, which is manageable, right? You need to exercise and check your blood. And I started using insulin at that time to support, keeping everything where it needed to be.
And that's hard. It's hard trying to exercise in your third trimester.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
everything gets a little bit achy.
Achy. Again, I work in a hospital. I'm on my feet a lot.
Gosh, yeah. You're amazing to be able to do all of that.
Thank you. And I think my anxiety was increased because, you're getting closer to birth, and again, I work in a hospital, so I'm and I've done a lot of work in pediatrics, and so it's kind of like that. Well, I know a lot of things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
I know a lot of things that can go well, but it's kind of like that mix of things. And again, as somebody who's kind of anxious to begin with, your mind wants to wander in that direction. But it also was really exciting. I mean, I felt like just the anticipation of, wow, here's a thing that, I didn't know was ever going to be possible for us, that here we're moving in that direction and trying to capture moments of joy and excitement alongside the fears of, okay, well, is this baby moving? Is it not?
Yeah, I had those. I mean, I think every new mother has those moments of like, I haven't felt the baby today. It's rough. It's a lot. So how did Asher come into this world?
So Asher was upside down. So he's breech.
When did you know he was all the time, or he just kind of flipped, or had he always been in that position?
Had always been in that position. Again, I was somebody who was monitored a whole lot.
Yeah.
So they could see that he was, kind of, actually, it was really beautiful. We worked with a postpartum doula who said, I think he just wanted to be closer to your heart. I just thought was so lovely. And so he was not in the right position. And we talked about doing an ECV, like to try to see if they could turn him. I decided against that. I just felt like, okay, whatever. I didn't want to do anything invasive. Everything had already been invasive. I just could not bear the thought of doing something that
it is quite brutal.
It's brutal, and without necessarily, a really high percentage of success rate. Like for a lot of people, just baby might flip again. And so I decided against doing that, and we went on a C-section. Okay. I gave birth in the hospital where I work, which was a choice I wanted to make to feel like I was supported by.
Yeah, for sure. At least people. The environment. It's, it's your second home at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, scary, but also pretty incredible. And again, I was blessed to have some colleagues there. So my, work wife at the time, I had her come and offer, a prayer before we went into the operating room, and just tried to be as calm as possible. It was not easy, but it was really incredible.
That's so special. So obviously you had positive experiences with those nurses and everyone around you, because I guess you were in the healthcare system. So I guess everyone was obviously very supportive, being an older mother.
Yeah. I mean, the staff were fantastic and really caring. Actually, one of the main nurses that was caring for me was, she must have been 15 weeks pregnant or something. She was in her own pregnancy. She was just incredibly supportive. I mean, it was scary. I had never been a patient in a hospital. And
just to be on the other side and really see a different perspective.
very nerve-wracking, but the staff were fantastic, and I tried to, get as much information as I could ahead of time, because that's a strategy that I like to use to lower my anxiety. And
Of course.
it was, again, helpful to be in a space where I felt like, okay, if I need something, I know people here. I know how to advocate for myself, and can do what I need to do.
How was that experience? Baby's here. You're stitched up. You're trying to breastfeed. How did that go?
Well, it was pretty mixed, I think. I mean, I think some of that is a blur.
Yeah, it's just survival. It's just fight or flight.
Yeah. And sort of the overwhelm of trying to figure all these things out. And, again, C-sections are, giving birth any way that you give birth is difficult on one's body. So just trying to, care for myself, care for this new infant. My husband stayed with me in the room, which was really great. I would say the less great part of my story is, so we were in the hospital for, the normal amount of time. It was really lovely. Like, the pediatrician and physician came in and said, I don't have to say this, but your son is perfect. Like, he's healthy and he's great. And that felt like such a relief after so much like worry and sort of warnings around, well, you're an older mother and you've gone through IVF and you have diabetes and we're not sure it's going to be small, is it going to be big? To hear someone say like he's great was so amazing. The scary part for me is, so we were discharged from the hospital, and then I developed preeclampsia, which was a thing we were paying attention to the entire time I was pregnant, right? Again, just paying attention. I always had like perfect blood pressure. Everything looked great, nothing of concern. And so I remember before we were discharged, thank God, the nurses said, we just need to give you this sheet, has some warning signs for you to pay attention to.
I always thought you got it during birth. I never thought you could get it after.
Apparently it's quite rare. Like, it's not a common thing, right? It's something that happens maybe leading up to pregnancy, and sometimes.
Okay, so extreme high blood pressure. Okay, sorry to interrupt there. You've been sent home. You've got your checklist for these warning signs. So when did it all kind of start to come to your mind that something's wrong?
We were home for about a day, and my in-laws were with us. Our doula was around. Was just trying to settle in at home, and I just felt like I couldn't think straight. Like it felt like I was staring at my breast pump for a really, really long time. I couldn't figure out why. I just thought like, okay, well, maybe you're just exhausted, right? Like, you just give birth. You do so many things and your body's in recovery and whatever else. And then I noticed that I was having trouble putting together sentences.
Scary.
It was really scary. And so at one point, my husband and I took a nap, and I woke up and I started having blurry vision and an extremely bad headache. And I don't remember exactly what happened. I think because I just like couldn't put together a sentence, we called the on-call line with my OBGYN, and they said, like, you need to come back to the hospital.
Where's your baby at this point?
He's at home with my in-laws. And again, this was 24 hours after I had left the hospital.
Yeah. And and again, you're stitched up.
I'm stitched up.
Dealing with all of this. And you're having to be shoved in a car and go back to the hospital.
So we go back to the hospital, and there's still COVID restrictions. So Toby can't even stay with me. He can like stay with me for a little bit. Then they decide, okay, we have a private room. We can put you in a private room, which sounded really great at the time. But I know now, as somebody with a lot of anxiety, it actually was really more scary to be by myself.
So isolated
with a lot of beeping machines and things like that. And one thing,
just nothing to do but think and overthink.
And the medication that they use to treat preeclampsia, for most people, what I understand now is that for most people, it just makes you drowsy. But there are some people, and I fall into this category.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. It makes you like loopy. Like I remember later my husband said, you seemed like when he was able to come see me, he said, you seemed like you were intoxicated. Like I was so scared. I just couldn't think straight. I couldn't sleep. I was just really just not thinking clearly. It was really, and that was the medication that they needed in order to treat me. Right. So there isn't a way around it. That was needed. So that was, pretty traumatic and terrifying. And again, something that I'm really grateful to those nurses for sharing those warning signs with me. Just again, it's a pretty small percentage of people that can develop this in the days after you give birth. Generally, what happens is that it's a condition that causes really high blood pressure. And one of the ways that they can alleviate it is to give birth. And so it goes away usually after someone gives birth, but it's sort of like you're in a zone until I think 6 weeks after birth.
So anyway. How long did you have to stay in the hospital for?
So I was there a couple of days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It felt like a really much longer time.
How was that being away from Asher? The first few days. I mean, I guess you're like stressed because you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I've had a C-section. I want to put him on my chest. I want to bond with him, and you can't do that. Yeah,
it was sad and scary. And, there were lactation consultants who came in and tried to help me pump. But again, the medication was just making me not think very clearly. And so it was a little bit like bewildering. I'm grateful it was only a couple of days, and, the treatment was successful, and I got to the hospital, in the time that I needed to get there. Again, it is a condition that, if left untreated, can cause strokes or death.
Very scary.
So, and again, is not specific to my age, right? Like, yes, okay.
Correct.
It is something that is maybe higher.
A high risk factor, yeah.
But it is something that can happen to anyone.
Exactly.
So, anyway, so many things I wish I had asked and understood better before.
Well, that's a good lesson to everyone. Like, always advocate for yourself and always ask questions. Always ask questions.
And I feel this is something, that I hear and think about a lot. Like, you know yourself best. And if you think something is wrong, say something. Like, I knew I was at home and I was like, something isn't right. And I can't think clearly, but something isn't right. To the people around me, it seemed like I didn't seem as strange as I felt internally. Mm-hmm. I think, I've asked them about what it was like during that time, and they sort of said, like, well, you seemed a little bit off, but you've just given birth. So,
yeah.
And so just really,
everything gets a pass when you've just given birth. It's exactly. Like, what could, everybody's completely off.
Yeah. So just like to trust yourself and know yourself.
Okay. So, little Asher, now 23 months. Do you have any interest in having a second, or are you guys done?
Jury is out. I think I do. And, that first experience was a lot. And
we've obviously can take away learnings from it. I guess you'd be better prepared the next time.
Yeah, I think, talking to specialists and getting as many questions as I can answered ahead of time is sort of the strategy that I'm going with while we're sort of sorting out what is best for our family and for each of us individually, and what's best for Asher too. And our dog. We have a beautiful.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, don't forget the dog. Absolutely.
And all the other considerations, right? Like finances and everything else. But I think for me and my gut, there's like a part of me that feels like, I need to do this again.
That's so fun. Just quickly before you let you go, please go back to, we touched on it in the beginning, but tell me a little bit about how you've been helping women who are over 35 and other women obviously as well to get through their pregnancy experiences.
Thanks. So one way that I do it is just by normalizing and sharing my story. I think, we always talk about representation matters. And I think being vocal and honest about my experiences is really important, trying to write about it and share about it. I'm really grateful to you for letting me share about my experiences here. But I now also run a practice meeting with individuals and couples, in any point in their journey, maybe people who are contemplating wanting to become pregnant, maybe people who are pregnant, maybe people who are in the midst of their own IVF, IUI, surrogacy treatment. And again, providing emotional and spiritual support to them. And that looks so different for each person. So, I worked with someone who also works in the hospital, and she worked primarily in pediatrics. And so when she got pregnant, it was, we would meet to, again, hold space for her fears and worries and all of the changes that were happening for her, and some of her own spiritual questions about just what it meant to be entering this season of her life. I worked with another couple who I hadn't known previously, but they had embryos and were, I met them at the point when they were about to start a transfer cycle, and they started feeling a lot of judgment from their physician about which embryo that they were hoping to transfer. And so I was meeting with them to try to strategize for, the best medical appointments, like how to best communicate with their physicians.
Yeah, because some could be a little bit, not going to say pushy, but, I don't know, they've given you their opinion, and, I get it. They've got 50,000 patients to see a day.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you just want to feel like you're being listened to.
Exactly. I mean, again, so much of the work that I do with Kaplan is about helping make space for people's stories and to be able to say things aloud that maybe they couldn't say anywhere else. And, not everyone I work with identifies as spiritual or religious, but for some folks, that is part of what they want, and so even if it's like, you're going through a retrieval cycle, and how can we mark that in a way that allows you to, just acknowledge where you are in that moment, to connect to the joy and the worries in that moment. If there's a particular ritual that you want to do, any of all that. So it's just really, it's a kind of person by person basis. And I feel so honored to be able to partner with people and do that work.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be, you're going to be a memory in their life and their journey forever. And that's really special, and have that connection.
Thanks, Haley. I hope so.
Why don't you just quickly tell people how they can find you? I'll also link it in the description to the podcast.
Amazing. So, my website is rvtivf.com.
That's a great website.
Thank you.
It's a good one.
Credit goes to Toby, who helped me think through that. Instagram handle and TikTok is at rvtivf. Or you can email me directly, rvtivf@gmail.com. And now through this podcast. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's amazing to share with you, Haley, and to get to know you. Thank you for all that you're doing through your work too.